What's up, guys? Welcome to my first production lesson. I probably still sound a little weird. I have like this crazy sinus cold, so bear with me. I'm gonna try and just kind of rush through this. So for this first production lesson, I wanted to cover the topic of using reference tracks. I feel like this is a great place for us to start. This is definitely an underrated and often overlooked tip that is, I feel like, the most beneficial. Plenty of professional artists are currently doing this, have been doing this for a long time. I feel like there is a small stigma around using reference tracks in this way. You know, some people feel like, oh, that's cheating, or I feel like I'm just copying. I hear you, but at the same time, it's like if you hear something that inspires you and compels you to want to create, I feel like it's a very natural process to figure out what it is that inspires you and to expand off of that. If you're ever feeling like you're either cheating or copying other people's sounds, then you're just not exploring far enough from your source material. So yeah, since I've been referencing tracks this way, I've noticed a huge difference in not only my mix downs, but also my songwriting. So in today's lesson, we're going to be taking a couple of my favorite tracks, tear them apart into different categories, you know, figure out what it is that's unique about them. And then we can also come up with some guides for ourselves. Since I've been doing this, I haven't really had like that feeling of writer's block or getting stuck on like a, you know, small loop. So I'm really excited to share this with you guys. I think you're gonna learn a lot from this, and yeah, let's just dive right into it. All right, cool. So the first thing we're gonna do is pull our track into the project. And we're gonna unwarp the track so we don't get any artifacts. The next thing we want to do is link the BPM of our project file to the one of the song. Ableton will actually try and read whatever the BPM of your track is. However, a lot of the times this is inaccurate, so I'll just show you a couple methods in case you're having problems. So the first thing I would do is to just use the tap function right up here next to the BPM. So if you just listen through a couple bars and then you tap out the tempo, it should get you pretty close. Oh, one more thing before we do that, always come here and make sure, as you can see, it kind of just like set the starting point to the first transient it detected. So just make sure you pull it all the way back so it's at the actual beginning of the song. All right, so we'll just listen to a little bit of the drop and then get that tempo in our head. And then once I stop it, we'll tap the tempo out. One, two, three, four. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that got us to 138.32, which is probably pretty close. The next thing I like to do to check and make sure it's in tempo is to just let it loop once. And if you loop it and it sounds like seamless, then you're probably either pretty close or right on. But if it kind of glitches as it loops, then you know that it's not the right tempo. So we'll just do that real quick. So you can hear it kind of glitch there. And you can honestly just look and see it. So the next thing I would do is just to manually drag the tempo until it lines up right where you think it should, which is about right there. And yep, it's 140. So in our case here, 140 was right. And then lastly, I always just double check by jumping through with the loop to make sure it's not skating at all. So yeah, we can tell that's all perfectly in time. All right, cool. So now that our tempo is synced up and we're good to go, the first thing we're gonna do here is come to this first group called song structure. So if you open this, you'll see a bunch of different audio tracks. So basically what we're going to do here is we're going to use blank MIDI clips to just kind of block out and label these sections of the song. So I'll show you what I mean. We're just going to listen through each part, and then I'm going to drag MIDI clips from this dummy folder down here into place to just kind of block out the whole structure of the song. So I would call that like a mix point, because there's not really much going on. It's more just for DJing in a new song. I would call this the intro here. So that's a build up here. And then you can see the build up on this one's pretty long, which is kind of suiting because it's a pretty loud drop, so it makes sense to have a longer build up like that. So I'm assuming this is the drop here. Let's listen real quick. Yep. And it's still the drop all the way through here. Let's listen to this part. So I would kind of consider this like a bridge of some sort. And that has a lot of the same elements from the drop, but I would consider that a build-up still. Yeah, definitely. It still builds up here. And then so we have our second drop right here. And then that would be like the outro or the mix point, whatever you want to call it. Cool, so there we've blocked out the whole structure of the song. From this point on, you could just take this whole track and, you know, drag it into a folder. And then later on, if I close this, I'll show you. Then you could just pull this into a blank project file and then kind of use that as a starting point to like, all right, cool, I'm going to try and make a mix point from here to here. And then I'm going to make a buildup that's this long and then make a drop. So right there, that kind of gets you out of being stuck in the loop. And then you can also get creative with this too and, you know, rearrange them however you like. But yeah, it's just a good starting point. Cool, so we're going to move on here. The next thing I have labeled is microstructure. For instance, this second drop was like a switch up. So I have here it is. I have a clip here, which I'll just copy over. And it says switch. So it switches up here. Also in this build-up, it like drops out on the second part. So for that, we could put drop out here. And then in this first drop section, you kind of hear it's like the first half of the drop is, it kind of plays the riff one way, and then the second half is a little different. So it's almost like I would call like an A-B situation here. I think it's actually shorter than that. Let's just shrink it up here. Yeah, so you can see it's like two kind of ideas and they go back and forth like that. And also within this drop, the first four, like this whole section here, is an octave higher, and then that lead drops an octave lower. So I might put a little note here for that too. Yeah, we can just go through and continue adding things as much as we feel the need to. The next section we'll fill out here is called call and response. It's definitely very common in dubstep, so I think it's worth to note. So if we go to the drop here, we'll kind of just map it out with these A, B, C, and D MIDI clips here. So I would say that first kind of growl or womp or whatever you want to call it is the call, which is actually pretty short here. And then we'll use the B here to represent that kind of trappy lead sound. And at the end there's that little bass fill, that kind of like sub sound. Here, I'm going to close this so we can see a little better here. And I'm just going to bring these over so I don't have to keep going back and forth here. So yeah, there's like a little bass fill here. And this is kind of like that lead and also the sub underneath it. They're both kind of, you know, filling out the part of a response. And then you kind of have the vocal that repeats here, but you also have this like one shot bass sound that comes in and out here. So like there. And then you have that other bass that comes in right here. I'm just going to change the color for our sake right now. So yeah, that would be like the basic call and response of this section of the track. We could move forward and do the second part of the drop as well. I'm sure it'll keep changing. But for now, I'm just going to copy this over and we'll listen again. So yeah, it changes a little here at the end. We'll just kind of change the colors for now. And then we'll go here and see what happens in the next section. And now here you can tell that's where the octave changes. So I'm just going to change the color. And then there's one last, I think the octave just changed on that too, but we'll just change the color. So yeah, that's the basic call and response of this song. And so this is kind of fun because you could actually, if you wanted to save this group as well, you could start with this in one of your own songs. And it's cool because like, since you're just referencing the call and response instead of the track itself, I feel like you're less likely to sound similar to this, because if you're just starting with this as a reference point, this could literally be any different kind of sounds and sound completely different from this, especially if you use like a different tempo or something like that. It's also fun too to like, you know, maybe explore just changing these clips around and coming up with your own call and response before you even like think about anything musically. But yeah, anyways, just interesting to look at and a good place to start if you're feeling stuck on a drop or something like that. So that's pretty much it for the song structure group I have here. Now that I've finished the song structure group, I'll actually just save the entire group to a folder. And I'll do this for every group as we go through this entire process here. So the easiest way to do that is to just grab it and drag it over into a folder. As you can see, I'm saving all my files to a folder called Hybrid Trap and Dubstep. So I've done this entire process to about 9 or 10 songs so far, including the song that we're doing right now, which by the way is called Angel's Crest, and it's by a group called Viper Active. So I've pulled this song and the rest of the reference songs I use for these from a playlist on my buymeacoffee.com. It's also where I'll be uploading this folder for you guys once I've finished referencing the rest of my tracks. So if you didn't find this video through my website, you can come to buymeacoffee.com/defconsound. You'll see it's pretty much the same thing as Patreon. There's a couple membership options. You can either subscribe to my DJ membership or my DJ and producer membership. You'll see I have a couple free posts up right now. I have a DJ lesson up right now, and then I have a couple sample packs that I've actually uploaded as well. If you come down here and click on view all posts, you'll find a link to this playlist that I've created. And this is actually the same playlist that I'll source all my DJ sets from. So yeah, I've gone through like all of SoundCloud to try and find the very best tracks I can. And I'll upload them here so you guys can check them out too and add them to your sets or whatever you want to do. And this is the same playlist I'm going to source my reference tracks from. So all the things that I'm making are going to be from songs that are from this playlist. So I plan to do this every month for you guys. Also, every month should be a different playlist as well. I won't always be doing the same genre, so if you're not super into this one, if you just stick around, they're going to be super different all the time. Usually just focus on electronic music though. All right, cool. Let's get back to the tutorial. So the next group I have is labeled Basic MIDI. So this group, we're going to kind of break down the main elements of our reference track and see if we can remake some of them. So the first thing we'll start with is this group, or this track called Drum Pattern. Now all this is a stock Ableton drum rack here. That way you guys can also, follow along with this. Which I should mention, I'm also going to upload this template to my buymeacoffee.com in case you guys want to do this yourself. So the first thing we'll do is just create a MIDI clip. And then we're going to play the song and see if we can recreate the basic drum pattern here. That was loud as fuck. So that sounds like the basic snare pattern. I'm going to go ahead and unmute this so we can kind of hear. So yeah, that seems pretty close to me. Let's stretch this out a little bit longer. I think it switches up over here. I noticed there's like a couple like side snares that come in on this section. And as you can hear, it seems like that's a little off time. So another cool thing about doing it this way is that if you just warp the track, I'm going to put it in Complex Pro so it doesn't get all glitchy. But now we can just slow it down. So if it's like really intricate drum beat or something that you really want to try and figure out, you can just slow the track down and kind of piece it together like note by note. So if we slow this down, we should be able to get this exact placement of that snare. So yeah, that seems like pretty much it. I'm gonna bring that back up to speed and listen. Also, seems to repeat over here as well. It switches up a little there. Yeah. I also noticed there's a ride cymbal kind of throughout this part. And you can hear there's like this sounds like somebody's playing drumsticks like on the side of a drum. I'm just gonna use a shaker because I don't have a rim sound in here right now. Yeah, it's just a clap for now, so we're just gonna use a shaker to kind of represent that. Sounds like it just goes like this. Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. We'll just listen real quick without the track playing. Cool, and that's pretty much it for the drum pattern. Like I said, we're not trying to like exactly replicate it, and right now it's just some stock sounds in there. You know, that way you guys can just use it right off the bat. Okay, so one last quick tangent. And I just really want to share this with you guys because I think you'll start to understand why this is so cool to do this. So if we just have a quick look at my production template that I use to produce music, I'm just going to open that real quick here. We'll save that. Okay, cool. So just real quick, this is my basic template that I use to produce with. So when I open up a new song, it's just going to look like this. The reason I wanted to show you this though is because the whole template I've built here is based around this drum rack right here. So this drum rack is kind of like the heart of my template. I have all my side chains already set up to this. So anything I play in MIDI drums here is already going to sidechain the entire rest of the song. And yeah, it just makes producing so quick. For instance, that beat that we just took from that other song, we could just pull that straight in here and just have an idea to start with right off the bat. And then it's really as easy as like swapping out these samples. Also in MIDI, you know, we could just layer this sample very easily by duplicating it in a group. And then, you know, you can just go in here and then just make it your own from there. So really, I feel like, you know, swap all the samples out and then, you know, change the tempo of the song even. Yeah, like we were at 119 some reason. And then, yeah, just get creative with it from there. You know, just kind of like edit it to whatever you think sounds cool. But yeah, it's just super useful to have all these different drum beats that you can just kind of throw in here right off the bat. and just get like a bunch of different ideas. Anyways, I just wanted to share that with you guys so you kind of understand why I think this is so cool, and why it's very useful to do this. So I think next month I'm actually going to share this whole template with you guys. We'll kind of break it down. I'll show you how to make it. So in case you just want to kind of implement it to whatever you're using currently. And I think I'll also just upload it in case anyone just would like to use the same template. I do find it pretty useful. Okay, sorry, last tangent. We're going to get back to the tutorial and we'll just kind of finish the whole thing up. And yeah. Okay, cool. So we're back in our project here. So we finished the drum patterns. The next thing we're going to move on to is called basic rhythms. So we're just going to listen to the track and kind of listen for any major rhythmic elements that are underlying throughout the track and just try and recreate them so we can use them later. I think right off the bat you hear that lead. So that might be something useful for our own productions, or just kind of interesting to remake and see how it's programmed. Seems like this maybe. Like one more here. And then that. Something along those lines. Let's listen to the second section and see what we can find. I think like that kind of what the snare's doing, it's like almost the reggaeton, moombahton thing. However, I feel like the underlying rhythm to that is something I hear a lot in this style of music. So that would definitely be something useful that we could take. So that would be the underlying rhythm. I know it switches up a little at the end, but I'm kind of more interested in just that, that basic rhythm. So we could use these clips for, a bunch of different things. Like this could be used as like a bass thing, rhythmic element, or for like another percussion. But anyways, it's always good to have. So that's kind of all I think we'll do right now for this track. The next MIDI thing in here would be the bass line. So sometimes it's pretty interesting to recreate the bass line. I'm not sure if there's a whole lot going on in this one, but let's just take a listen and see. Yeah, it's worth recreating. There's definitely a cool rhythm in the bass line in this first part that I didn't notice for the last thing. So maybe we could double it up afterwards. So sometimes it's kind of hard to like hear what the sub note is playing, especially if you don't have like a really good sound system. One quick tip I'll give you guys is to utilize some kind of spectrum analyzer like this. And you'll see if you hover over it right here, right down here, it'll actually tell you the note name. So it looks like it's actually playing a D note. So I think I was incorrect. So let's listen to that. It sounds so bad. I really think it's down here and that the pitch bend is just throwing us off a little bit. That sounds close enough for me. Like I said, we're not trying to completely recreate it anyways. Let's see what the second part is doing here. So yeah, I feel like that's, that's pretty much the bass line right here. I mean, I typically wouldn't really save the bass line, but you can if you want to. It's kind of fun to note. I notice a lot of the times I tend to overcomplicate my bass lines, so it's interesting to at least see that it doesn't really take like that complicated of a bass line to make a good song. It's more like you notice in this song, at least it's more about the rhythmic element, not so much like the notes it's playing. And I find with a lot of electronic music, there seems to be only like a couple notes for the most part. All right, cool. So now that we've finished bass, the next thing I'll move on to is the scale, which again, in this song, I don't know if there's a whole lot of musical content. So we'll kind of like move around to maybe like the intro or something to try and find like the most musical part. Okay, so we actually get a lot of music information from this part here. I think I'm actually going to recreate this part of the bass line just to get a couple more notes. All right, cool. So we got a couple more notes. That's gonna help us figure out what the key of the song is. So if you've kind of copied a part and you got a couple notes that you know are in the song, you can just come here, click the fold button. So if you don't know a lot of music theory like me, I know some, but not a whole lot. So I'll just go over here, click on the scale option here. So then it's gonna start highlighting the scale. So you can kind of make an educated guess. So the root note here is C#3. So let's just go to C# and guess that because the song's kind of dark, it's probably a minor key. And then you can see that all the notes are actually in that key. So my guess is that this song is in C# minor. Yeah, so then you can kind of save this whole scale as well in your folders here to use later. So we figured out the scale and the bass line and the basic rhythms. I don't think there's really much of a chord progression other than that kind of bass line we just figured out would probably be like, you could make chords off of that now if you wanted to. However, there aren't really many chords in the song, so I'm not going to do that right now. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the MIDI section. Really the most interesting things I find, or the most useful, would be the drum pattern and the basic rhythms. Those are definitely super easy to build off of in your own music. The bass lines are more just, for me, interesting to look and see what other people are doing. And then the scale is also useful too. Okay, cool. So now that we finished the basic MIDI, you can save some of these clips if you'd like, and then we'll just close that up and we'll move on to the next group. So this group is called Song Elements, and for this section, I think of this more as like a ear training practice. So what I like to do is just kind of zoom in on my reference track, and I'll go through each section of the song and I'll just listen to it on repeat a couple times, and then I'll try and list every single element that's happening. So you can hear the kind of singing, like the choir that's going on here. There's some kind of arpeggiator happening. There's either some kind of pad or chords thing going on in the background. And I think it's either, it almost sounds like a vocal stab that's repeating, or maybe it's part of the ARP. I'm not really sure right now, so I'm just gonna kind of throw chant in here to represent that. Yeah, you can hear now that that is some kind of vocal. It might not even be an arpeggiated thing. And then at the end there, you can hear there was a siren and also like an uplifter sound in here. So I'm gonna put that there, and then this siren thing right at the end there. And we'll move on to this next section. And then like another vocal comes in. Anyways, you can see like there's just like so much going on. Like the more you repeat a small section and listen, like the more things you'll discover. I find this really useful, especially if you feel like your songs are like missing something but you don't really know what it is. Like they're close but they're not quite there. I feel like this is also a really good practice to do to your own music. So like take your song and do this for each section, kind of just like, you know, you maybe not do it just like this, but mentally note what's going on, and then like compare it to another song that you know that you think is a really good song, and do it to each section and just like see like maybe what you could add. So you can go back to your reference track and be like, well, they have all this going on, and in, you know, in my intro I only have like 2 things going on, so maybe I could think about adding like, you know, a chant or like a siren in there. So yeah, it just gives you some ideas of things you can use to fill in your tracks and kind of give them that extra life and those extra layers to everything. Like even in the drop section, let's just do this real quick because I feel like there's a lot more going on than it really sounds like at first. So obviously we have that, but we have this sub in here. We have like a growl right off the bat. And make this grid a little smaller. And we have like this vocal thing. We'll just call it a chant for now. That also repeats in here. And then you have that weird lead kind of trappy thing on top of that. And then we have like a little wub at the end here, which this is kind of like what we did for the A-B section, but you get the point. Like you start hearing other things that you didn't notice before. Like I never really noticed that chant in the background through my first listen. But yeah, just super cool thing to do. Kind of reveals some things and gives you a lot of cool ideas of what you could do with your tracks to kind of fill them out a little more, and like different layering ideas. So that's pretty much it for that. That's more of like a song, like a really like an ear training technique. All right, cool. So we've gone through, we figured out the song structure. We recreated some of the key elements in MIDI. And then we went through and listened for each individual song element that goes on in certain sections. The last thing I like to do is to take a look at the actual audio waveform utilizing some analyzers. So I like to start with a spectrum or frequency analyzer. Ableton has a free one called Spectrum. If you open it up, one thing to note, the settings are kind of obnoxious on it. I like to turn off auto and set it from like 0 to like maybe negative 60 or so. Cool. So now that you've done that, if you check the corner here, wherever you hover your mouse over is going to show you some information. So one thing we can do is to just hover right over the sub here. So you can see now that the sub is peaking at -4 decibels. So if we're trying to match this kind of mix down or this master here, we know that after our track has been mastered, we kind of want our sub to hit at around the same level here. Other cool things to note in this mix here would be to try and find the snare and see where that's peaking at. And you can see it right here. And so the snare is a C sharp note, and it's peaking at around negative 17 decibels. And it's kind of interesting too, because I feel like that's a very high note for a snare. I didn't really realize it at first, which is surprising because it is definitely like a trappy, very high pitched snare. Another thing to note is where this kick is hitting. So this kick is kind of fat over here, but you can see that that is peaking at around negative 10 decibels. Another thing to note is kind of look at the curve of this whole song. You notice that there's a lot of free space kind of like in here. However, the snare and the lead are taking up a lot of space over here. Like there's really not a whole lot going in here until you hear that like last wub bass coming right there. I feel like that is a good indication of like how to get the mix sounding this loud, because they free up a lot of space in here. One last thing I forgot to talk about is the high end here. We could check and see where the cymbals are hitting. So you can see the cymbals kind of like peaking around negative 36. Kind of the cymbals seem to be kind of in this general range, like negative 36. So that kind of gives you a couple things. You know, you want to hit that level for your sub, try and get your kick around that level, your snare, and then, you know, your hi-hats here. And then also kind of thinking about it in a spatial context where it's like creating space in certain areas so that, you know, other areas can be a little bit louder. And just looking at the general curve of the song and comparing that to your own song, you know? So that's just a couple things you can learn from looking at the track with a frequency analyzer. Oh, one thing I wanted to cover, if you're not just using, you know, like the stock Ableton one, some frequency analyzers will have a slope on them. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So for instance, this one, I believe this one's free as well. It's called Span. But a lot of analyzers will come with a slope, typically around like 4 or 5. And I'll show you what that means. So at first glance, you would think that this sub is negative 36 around there. However, it's just a slope on it, so it slopes the whole audio waveform. So if I like take this slope and adjust it, you'll see what it does here. I like to keep mine at 0. Some people like to try and mix with a slope on, and then they just try and mix it so it looks like a flat line. However, I would rather know exactly what's going on here. With that said, even if you had a slope on, you should be able to hover over and still tell what the actual decibels are. Actually, no, it doesn't look like you can. Yeah, so I like to keep it on 0. Just make sure that your analyzer doesn't have a slope on, or if it does have one on, just that you realize it has one on, and you're not trying to, you know, like get your highs to match the same level as your sub, because that would not sound good. The next thing I suggest you kind of analyze your reference tracks with would be a loudness analyzer. So I'm using this one by Melda Production. I believe it's free. I'm not too sure. You'd have to check. I like this one a lot. It has LUFS on it. It has the crest. It just has all sorts of different meters for loudness. And it also has this waveform here. So if we take a listen to the drop in this track, we can kind of get an idea of where we want our LUFS to hit if we want to try and match, you know, this loudness. So this track is pretty insane. It's at -4 LUFS, so that's pretty damn loud. And however, it sounds fairly clean, which is, I feel like, pretty hard to achieve. All right, cool. So after that, what else can we check out? Another good analyzer would be a spectrogram. So what this does is it shows you not only the frequency spectrum, but it gives you like a history, like a time. And you've probably seen these all over the internet. Definitely can be useful to like see different harmonics when you're doing sound design, or you can see pitch bends in these. And you can tell, like, you can see the snare in there, how it's like fills up the entire frequency spectrum, and that the hi-hats are a little less here. Definitely a very helpful tool. You can kind of, figure out what the gain staging should look like if you're trying to match the energy levels of a mix, and also like hit those loudness levels. And yeah, so that pretty much sums up my process of using reference tracks. Again, check out my buymeacoffee.com. I'm going to be posting a whole pack of all these track breakdowns for you guys. Obviously, I'm not going to be including the tracks, but you can find those tracks through that playlist as well. Next month, I think I'm going to post my production template and post a video breaking that down for you guys. There's a lot of cool devices and things I do in there that I think you guys will find useful. Anyways, thanks guys for tuning in. Hopefully I didn't drag this out too long. And let me know what you guys think. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to hit me up. And yeah, all right. I'll see you next month.